Good evening and welcome to the July 16th meeting of Troy City Council. Please silence your cell phones during the meeting. We will begin this evening with a moment of silence for the Troy firefighter paramedic Jason Holfinger, followed by the invocation by Mrs. Robin Oda, and then the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Lord, as we gather here tonight, we are mindful that there's a family in our community that's hurting. Our fire department is hurting over the loss of this young man. And Lord, we just pray that you would put your arms around them and give them comfort as they deal with this loss. Pray that we would be as supportive as we can be, and just pray that the next few days and weeks will be under your care and that you will give them the comfort and grace that is needed to go through this tragedy. Lord, we also want to think of our sister city in Japan, Takahashi City, and the flooding that they have experienced over the last week or two. Those people are also hurting, Lord, in a different way, and we just want to think of them as our sister city and pray that you would be with the people there. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would also like to offer our condolences to Troy Police Officer Chris Tilley on the death of his brother, who was a police officer in Jacksonville, Arkansas. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Oda?
Here.
Mr. Twist?
Here.
Mr. Swazer?
Here.
Mr. Lutz?
Here.
Mr. Heath?
Here.
Mr. Sievert?
Present.
Mr. Phillips?
Here.
Mr. Kendall?
Here.
Mr. Terwilliger?
Here.
All members are present.
Tonight we have two public hearings. The first is Ordinance 032, 2018. Mrs. Knight, would you please read that?
Ordinance number 032, 2018, changing the zoning of parcel DO804 104502 at 1823 Peters Road from R1 Single Family Residential District to R3 Single Family Residential District.
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of this ordinance? If so, please come to the microphone and state your name and address.
Good evening. I'm Bart Denlinger. I'm managing partner of 3Gen D Development. I'm at 3035 McCaig Road. We are the owners of the property, and we all know the legacy of this property, and we are trying to keep that in our minds as we plan to develop this. Currently, we have an R1 zoning on this property, which we don't feel would really meet the needs of our buyers out there right now. We think the R3 would be a little more diversified to provide the product that our clients are looking for. I'm open to any questions or suggestions that council may have.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Denlinger.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate it. Anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak in favor of this ordinance? Anyone in the audience who wishes to speak against this ordinance? Seeing none, I will declare this public hearing closed. We'll move to the next one. Mrs. Knight, please read Ordinance 033, 2018.
Ordinance number 033, 2018, changing the zoning of in-lot 10797 on Washington Road, a parcel of 33.3712 acres, from the county zoning of A2 General Agricultural District to the city zoning of R3 Single Family Residential District.
I declare this public hearing open. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of this ordinance? Anyone in the audience who wishes to speak against the ordinance?
The name is David Enneking, 1545 Washington Bend Court, Troy. The only big questions I really have is a concern about drainage in that area. In the county map, that is an open ditch in the back, but it has been covered in by the years of a main tile and a farmer, and it's deteriorated. And a lot of that backs up right now into Darrell Duncan's backyard. And there's also, farm tiles that are involved. There's one main tile that goes behind all of our lots, the people that live just north of that property. And it feeds off of, Heil from the west. It used to be John Heil's farm. And then it comes back through there, and that feeds into that ditch. And that would be in that buffer zone that Jessica has mentioned, that there'd be a buffer zone. I just want to make sure that no damage happens to that tile. Otherwise, our land that drains toward that would have issues. So that's the biggest thing I have the main concern of. And also the access of where are they going to be going in and out of the properties.
Okay.
Those are my main concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Enneking. Anyone else in the audience?
Lester Connor, 1210 South Clay Street, Troy, Ohio. My concerns are, if we do away with all our agricultural land, we're all going to be eating out of toothpaste tubes with the food coming from contaminated countries. And then, on the other hand, we don't get enough jobs in Troy. I don't see how building more homes is it will help the city financially, but it's not, people ain't even going to be working here in the city. They'll be working somewhere else, and if their city income tax is higher than Troy's, we ain't even going to get their city income tax. So all we're going to end up doing is getting property tax off of them. I just don't understand why we're all this big push on all this property all of a sudden. I mean, every year, we just keep building, and then when the city and mayor and Mr. Titherton and then some other people go to Europe and Asia, we ain't bringing any more jobs back. They're just taking a free trip. I don't understand it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience have any comments?
Robert Broombaugh, the wife and I are in Staunton Township. The wife and I are opposed to the Nottingham development east of Washington Road. I would mirror the comments of Mr. Conard with regards to the destruction of agricultural land. To me, the city is beset by a plague of builders. Based on the recent build-out, just about a mile from us off the Troy-Pickway Road, they put 25 houses up there in a matter of 8 to 9 months, which is pretty representative of the ability to put homes up and create infrastructure. To me, it looks like the infrastructure will be overwhelmed. Streets, schools. My count says there will be 300 new homes, and this is not counting any new ones to be proposed shortly. The Halifax build is a case of cart before the horse. We've got a subway, we've got a service station, a chiropractor, a bank, and no real amenities for all those people out there. And to me, the build-out looks like it's going to be northeast Troy. That's it. You're landlocked in other directions. To me, the council is far too cozy with the builders. If Troy's become a honeypot where no one here says no. Build at any cost. Build, build, build at any cost. And we'll worry about the infrastructure catching up later. The bankers and the builders and the realtors are going to get rich off of this, or are getting rich, and the common folks will end up paying the bills. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
I'm John Wilson, 1125 Washington Road.
My property abuts the entire south side of the proposed development. I'm not initially against the development, but I do have some concerns, much as David did. There's an open ditch that runs between my lot and the proposed development, and the closed ditch that he talked about becomes a open ditch on the east side of my property. I guess I'm mostly concerned about street runoff, that it's not intended for that ditch and it's properly run into the city system, so that I don't have water problems as well. She also mentions that she's going to have a buffer to the north, keep the creek, how does she say it, natural or whatever. I guess hopefully that means a buffer to the south as well. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any comments? Okay, I declare the public hearing closed. I will say that the ordinances following tonight's meeting will go to committee, and there will be committee meetings on those before they come back to council. Mrs. Knight, please read a summary of the minutes of the July 2nd meeting of Troy City Council.
Minutes of Council, July 2, 2018. Nicole Loy, Executive Director of Troy Main Street, provided a presentation and update. There was a public hearing on the tax budget, which is R24, 2018. Committee reports. Community and Economic Development Committee reported, recommends that ordinance number 026, 2018 be adopted to provide for rezoning of part of in-lot 9891. Committee recommends that legislation be prepared to provide for 3 legislative items associated with the Del Camp annexation. Finance Committee recommended that legislation be prepared authorizing a loan in the amount of $50,000 for the repairs to the building at 911 East Main Street. Streets and Sidewalks Committee recommended legislation be prepared authorizing final assessment for phases 9 and for phases 10 of the sidewalk repair program. Recommended a contract be authorized for the Fire Station 3 concrete drive replacement project, and also recommended the resolution of necessity be approved for the sidewalk program phase 11. Resolution number R24, 2018, adopting the tax budget, first reading and adopted. Resolution number R25, 2018, application of ADM Real Estate Holdings for a loan for the repairs to 911 East Main Street was given first reading and adopted. Resolution number R26, 2018, establishing services for proposed annexation, first reading and adopted. Resolution number R27, 2018, establishing buffer requirements for an area proposed to be annexed, was given first reading and adopted. Resolution number R28, 2018, consenting to annexation of certain territory of 10.284 acres, first reading and adopted. Resolution number R29, 2018, bid and contract for Fire Station number 3 concrete drive replacement project, first reading and adopted. Resolution number R30, 2018, resolution of necessity, Phase 10 of sidewalk replacement program, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 026, 2018, a rezoning of part of in-lot 9891 was given third reading and adopted. Ordinance number 030, 2018, final assessments, Phase 9 sidewalk program, first reading and adopted. Ordinance 031, 2018, final assessments, Phase 10 sidewalk improvement program was given first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 032, 2018, a rezoning of the property at 1823 Peters Road was given first reading. Ordinance number 033, 2018, the change of zoning for a parcel on Washington Road was given first reading. A presentation was then made by Kathy Roeder regarding the branding initiative of the ATP. Following various comments, council adjourned at 8:03 p.m.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Move for adoption of the minutes.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Mr. Phillips and seconded by Mr. Twist to adopt the minutes. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Lutz?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Move on to committee reports, and we have a report from the Recreation and Parks Committee this evening, and Chairman, Mr. Brock Heath.
Yes, Madam President, thank you. Committee members Oda and Terwilliger met July 9 to consider the recommendation of the Board of Park Commissioners to permit overnight camping in a fire pit at Treasure Island Park by the University of Dayton River Stewards, September 8th and 9th. As camping and fire pits are prohibited by ordinances, council would need to enact notwithstanding legislation to permit controlled temporary camping in a fire pit for this particular event. It is a recommendation of this committee that notwithstanding legislation be prepared to permit temporary camping and a fire pit at Treasure Island Park overnight, only on the dates of September 8th and 9th, 2018, and only by those associated with the UD River Stewards Program. This is respectfully submitted by Robin Oda, John Terwilliger, and myself as chair of this.
Are there any questions from council?
Yes, Madam President.
Mr. Schweizer?
Will there be just one fire pit, or will it be a couple of them?
I believe it'll only be one, but it would be very few, maybe a couple. The important point being, though, that the fire department will be monitoring it, and we'll have
That's my next question.
specific guidelines and procedures that they will have to follow.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Do you have anything further, Mr. Heath?
No, ma'am, thank you.
Thank you. Streets and Sidewalks Committee has the next reports from Chairman Mr. Bobby Phillips.
Thank you, Madam President. The committee met consisting of Mr. Lutz and myself on July 9 to review a request by staff to add $200,000 to the roadway paving portion of the 2018 paving program. There are additional roadways that would benefit from being repaved this year, and the additional funding is available. It is the recommendation of the committee that legislation be prepared authorizing an increased authorization for roadway paving by $200,000, which would increase the 2018 paving program authorization to a not-to-exceed amount of $1.032 million. As the paving contract has been awarded and the work schedule is being prepared, consideration of emergency legislation is supported. And this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Heath, Mr. Lutz, and myself as chairman.
Are there any questions from council members? You may continue, Mr. Phillips.
We also heard a staff recommendation and request on July 9th for authorization on an application for Ohio Public Works Commission funds for the Riverside Drive Improvement Project Phase 3. The project area is from the north property line of Orchard Drive to the Duke Park entrance. The grant application would be for an amount not to exceed $600,000. The current project estimate is $1.316,580,000. This project would be designed in 2019 and bid in 2020. It is the recommendation of the committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to file an application for OPWC funds for the Riverside Drive Phase 3 Improvement Project and to execute any necessary agreements if the funding application is approved. As the application deadline is July 23rd, we support emergency legislation, and this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Heath, Mr. Lutz, and myself as chair.
Are there any questions from council members? Thank you, Mr. Phillips. The Utilities Committee has our last report this evening from Chairman Mr. John Terwilliger.
This committee met on July 11th to consider an agreement between the city and Miami County to provide for extending the city's existing 12-inch water line on Experiment Farm Road to UVMC to provide a secondary water feed to the hospital's facilities. The project will be designed, contracted, and managed by the county. As part of the project is outside of the city limits, the city would reimburse the county for 30% of the contracted costs, not to exceed $336,135. The county will be submitting a grant application to the Ohio Public Works Commission funding for part of the project cost. The project funding agreement outlined project's responsibilities, including this funding. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into the Upper Valley Medical Center Waterline Extension Loop Project Funding Agreement. That's a big one. With the Board of Miami County Commissioners related to the Waterline Extension Project, while the cost to the city is not to exceed that $336,135, as the county must file an application with the Ohio Public Works Commission by July 23rd. The city's commitment is part of this application process. And this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Twist, Mr. Lutz, and myself, John Twilliger, as chairperson.
Are there any comments or questions from council members?
Madam President, if
Mr.
if
Twilliger.
appropriate, we would like to take this to a second reading.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay. We'll move on to resolutions and ask Mrs. Knight to read Resolution R31, 2018.
Madam President, are you going to ask citizens any comment on it?
Yes, thank you. Do any citizens have any comments at this point in the meeting? There is a 2-minute time limit, and Mr. Grant Kerber is our timekeeper.
Mr. Conley, 1210 South Clay Street. My question is, on R32, 2018, you have it down as emergency legislation, and from what I heard tonight, it's going to be 2019 and then 2020 before anything is done. So my question is, why is this considered as emergency legislation?
Mr. Titterington, would you like to address that?
This is the authorization to file the application, and so that goes through the state process, and the deadlines are well in advance of when the design and the construction work have to be done. So the deadline is coming up soon to get that application in. That's why the emergency is necessary.
Okay, but, you know, I mean, I've said it, I think Jerry Stitzler said it, several other people have said it. Seems like everything basically is emergency legislation. It can't all be emergency legislation. Either somebody dragging their feet and waiting for the time limit to get close before you even bring it forward. You know, it just don't make sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizen comments at this point in the meeting? Move on then to resolutions and ask Mrs. Knight to read Resolution R31, 2018.
Resolution number R31, 2018, resolution amending resolution number R13, 2018, increasing the authorization for the 2018 paving program and declaring an emergency. This increases the amount of money for road paving to $800,000. First reading.
Question on the amount?
Increases the, the road paving amount from $800,000 to $1 million, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from council?
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Phillips and seconded by Mr. Schweizer to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Schweizer?
Yes.
Mr. Lutz?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Terwilliger?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes. Move to adopt.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Mr. Schweizer and seconded by Mr. Heath to adopt the resolution. Are there any comments or questions from council or any further discussion? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Lutz?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Terwilliger?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Schweizer?
Yes.
Legislation is approved.
Mrs. Knight, please read Resolution R33, 2018.
Resolution number R32, 2018, a resolution authorizing Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State capital improvement and/or local transportation improvement programs, and to execute contracts as required and declaring an emergency. This is the application for Phase 3 of the Riverside Drive Improvement Program. First reading.
Are there any questions or comments from council members?
Move to suspend the rules on that.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Heath and seconded by Mr. Phillips to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Terwilliger?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Lutz?
Yes.
Move for adoption.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Phillips and seconded by Mr. Schweizer to adopt the resolution. Is there any discussion from council? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Lutz?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read Resolution R33, 2018.
Resolution number R33, 2018. Resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio to enter into an agreement with the Board of Miami County Commissioners for the Upper Valley Medical Center, UVMC, Waterline Extension Loop Project Funding Agreement and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Are there any questions from council?
I have a question, Madam President.
Yes.
So then are we selling the water to the county and then the county's going to have the county premium like people in the county do right now? How are we recouping our $330 that we're going to put into that?
As development occurs, that's part of our comprehensive plan. And so, yes, we will be charging the end user as, there will be a master meter. And so it'll go through the county system, and as there's use, then they will be charged. In the intervening area between UVMC and where our line terminates now, there's not estimated any hookups immediately.
Okay.
So we would just be participating in that project so that we own up to the access drive, I guess, to the DPL substation.
So there'll be no water used currently from that, and it's just going to be stubbed off?
It'll be no, it'll connect to UVMC. It'll be a secondary line, however, it's a backup line for that.
And we're just doing it so we can lay out the land up to UVMC for potential tap-ins?
Well, I wouldn't say we're laying out the land. We're not going to be doing any design or engineering or replanning.
No, I understand. You know what I mean. So we're
just going to,
our
we'll just
advantages.
own that land, and so our advantage is that we will have property that's more shovel-ready when there's new industrial development that wants to come in.
Between us and the hospital?
Between us and the DP&L substation, which is south of the hospital.
Madam President,
Did you have anything?
No, thank you.
Mr. Terwilliger?
we requested this go to second reading.
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Schweizer?
Will we be able to tap onto that line and go further north should the need arise?
Certainly.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, this then, without objection, will go to a second reading. Move on to ordinances and ask Mrs. Knight to read ordinance 032, 2018.
Ordinance number 032, 2018, ordinance changing the zoning of parcel D08104502 at 1823 Peters Road in the city of Troy, Ohio, from the zoning of R1, Single Family Residential District, to the zoning of R3, Single Family Residential District. This has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission, had a public hearing this evening, and the setting of a committee meeting is pending.
Do we have a committee meeting time set for that, or not yet?
The committee was talking about this coming Thursday at 6:15, but I do not know that all members, if they all can make it, we will This Thursday, 6:15.
Thursday at 6:15, there will be a meeting here in council chambers on that topic then. And that will go to a third reading. Mrs. Knight, please read ordinance 033, 2018.
Ordinance number 033, 2018, ordinance changing the zoning of in-lot 10797 on Washington Road, a parcel of 33.3712 acres in the city of Troy, Ohio, from the county zoning of A2 General Agricultural District to the city zoning of R3 Single Family Residential District. This has also been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission. There was a public hearing this evening. Will also be a subject of the committee meeting to be held this Thursday at 6:15 p.m.
Then this also will go to a third reading. Mrs. Knight, please read ordinance 034, 2018.
Ordinance number 034, 2018, ordinance authorizing the use of an area of Treasure Island Park for a 2018 University of Dayton River Stewards Program event, notwithstanding conflicting provisions of the codified ordinances of the city of Troy, Ohio. This would permit those only associated with the River Stewards Program on September 8th and 9th to have overnight camping and to have recreational fire pit or pits. First reading.
Are there any questions or comments from council?
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Kendall and seconded by Mr. Sievert to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Lutz?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Move for adopt. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Schweizer and seconded by Mr. Phillips to adopt the ordinance. Is there any discussion from council? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Lutz?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read ordinance 035, 2018.
Ordinance number 035, 2018, ordinance changing the zoning of a 107.171 acre parcel that is part of inlot 9891, parcel R50005200, from AR agricultural residential and OC1 office commercial district to a planned development. This has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission. There will be a public hearing at the next council meeting. First reading.
And this also will go to a second reading. That completes the business portion of tonight's meeting. Mrs. Knight, are there any communications or announcements?
No, they're not.
Mr. Titterington, do you have any comments this evening?
No, ma'am, thank you.
Thank you. Director of Law, Mr. Kerber, any comments this evening?
No, Madam President, thank you.
Thank you. City Auditor, Mr. Friggy,
Thank you,
comments?
Madam President, I have nothing.
Thank you. Any comments from city council members this evening?
Madam President,
Mr. Twist.
I would like to thank all of those who volunteered their time for the Troy Kids Triathlon on Sunday. There was over 300 kids that participated, ages 4 to 14, and wanted to thank Carrie and her pool staff. They did a tremendous job helping and encouraging those small ones as they were swimming. So they just did a absolutely tremendous job. And I also would like to thank Cheryl Cheney, who does quite a bit to help make sure that it goes well and does a lot of things ahead of time. So I wanted to thank her personally and the Troy Pool staff for an excellent job in making that a success. And I believe it's one of the largest kids triathlons in Ohio.
Thank you.
Madam President.
Go ahead.
Mrs. Oda.
I have a question regarding the water line extension program. If this goes, it is going to a second reading, but does this mean that that will now miss the OPWC deadline?
Since the meeting, I have talked to the county. There are a couple questions that one of the commissioners has. That's why we're going to go to a second reading. It will not impact the application. They will apply as they need to, so they will meet the deadline. And then once we have our questions their questions answered. It will not impact our decision.
Thank you.
Mr. Seaver?
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to thank the city for the 4th of July celebration on behalf of Troy Rotary for our 100th anniversary. I know lots of people were there. I think we had about 1,500 people, maybe a few hundred more by the time the fireworks went off, but the city was very helpful in assisting us in putting on that event, and I think it was very well attended and led off straight by the fireworks. Secondly, I know we are grieving the loss of a Troy firefighter, but I also, a prominent friend and Troy businessman, Joe Claddy, passed away, and I just wanted to mention that as well, that we would miss him, and he did a lot for the city of Troy, a lot behind the scenes, and he will be sorely missed in the community.
And likewise, Mr. Seaver, we appreciate the Troy Rotary stepping forward with the concert on July 4th. I think a lot of people enjoyed that. And
It was
a
fun.
neat evening. Very nice. Any other comments from council members? Anyone in city staff have any comments this evening?
I just want to take the time to tell all of you, thank you. It is a very difficult time for our firefighters, but I want you to be rest assured we're going to meet the needs of those firefighters with the help of the mayor, Patrick, and Tom have been outstretching their arms to make sure our firefighters' mental well-being is taken care of. All of you council members that reached out to us, we couldn't do what we're doing without your support. It is going to be a tough time, but we owe Jason a lot. We owe him the opportunity to honor him, and we couldn't do that without your support. I think we have been reached out by fire departments from Cincinnati to Lima to Columbus that want to help out. So we're going to do Jason right by honoring him for serving this community for 6 years. So we couldn't do it without your support, and I just wanted to take the time to say thank you to you, and also the mayor has been communicating to us via email. So thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Any other comments from city staff? Anyone else in the audience have any comments this evening?
Mr. Conner, 1210 South Blake Street. I'd like to thank Mr. Siebert for mentioning Joe. He was a very good person. He was a friend. He'll be missed by many, to the wife. Thank you.
Any other comments this evening? Thank you all for attending tonight's meeting. Have a safe and peace-filled week. Meeting adjourned.